So it's time to get out of bed and start moving. I have a lot of things to do. Today, I have a beginning. You want to know what starts? So here I am starting the rest of my life. Day 1. Yes, here it is. It's just the way it is. My life is small right now, but it's all I have. I work hard and try to do the right thing. I think I've been a good father. The kids are good kids. They are small and very active. Keith is 8 years old and Andrea is 6. They are great kids. They like school. Keith is in 3rd grade and Andrea is in 1st grade. The children do not deserve what is about to happen. This is a consequence of their mother's actions. Let me take you back a little bit so you can see what's going on. So the children. Both children look like their mother. They have her eyes. They have her smile. Neither one of them looks like me. But I'm not the prettiest guy on 2 legs. But I'm not a freak either. I'm 6 feet tall and weigh 165 pounds. I run every day and work out a couple days a week. In the summer, I compete in competitive cycling. And in the winter, I ski. I have a full head of dark brown hair cut pretty short and all my own teeth. My parents spent a lot of money on orthodontics when I was a kid, so my smile is just fine. I wear glasses or contact lenses depending on what I'm doing. I am 34 years old. My wife Karen is my age. We met at university. I'm an engineer and she's a web developer. Karen and I and the kids live in Albany, New York. I know Albany, the most boring city in the universe. Believe me when I say that life in Albany is, laid back. Don't get me wrong. Albany is a very nice city. I find that it is my life that is the most peaceful part. Some, including my wife, would call me boring. In my defense, the demands of everyday life, family, work, home, and all the mundane things that occupy our lives have shaped me to be just that kind of person. When there is time for adventure, we are forced to squeeze it into other demands. This means that fun is sometimes limited to weekends and summers. So this morning, when I got out of bed and looked at myself in the mirror before my run, I thought, damn, what am I going to do? You see, I have a problem. I went for my usual run, and as I paced briskly down the sidewalk, I decided I needed to visit my friend and talk to him. Jordan Walters and I went to high school together and grew up around the corner from each other. I know his family well and they know mine. Jordan is my friend and my attorney. His practice is mostly wills, probate, and some business matters, but he also does family law. So I mentally decided to give him a call. I got home around 6:30 after my run, put on my coffee, showered, and got dressed. When I got down to the kitchen, Karen was already stirring and the kids were quietly snoozing. And then I made the school lunches and got myself a sandwich and a piece of fruit. Soon, everyone was sitting at the counter on the other side of the kitchen island, crunching cereal and toast. We made small talk about the day before, and I was reminded that there would be parent-teacher conferences at school soon. It's all good. I kissed everyone goodbye except Keith. Keith and I clashed fists. That was his new greeting. I headed out the door for another day of good old boring life. The day of parent-teacher conferences was also the day of my own meeting. It was a meeting of 2 people. Jordan and I met at a coffee shop that was halfway between mine and his office. We shook hands, since I hadn't seen him in months, and sat down at a table. We ordered coffee and I ordered a slice of apple pie. Jordan was always focused, and he was no different now. After the coffee and pie arrived, he started. Okay, Mark, what's up? I need your help. I have a problem that needs to be solved, and before I do anything, I need your expertise. Okay, what's your problem? Karen. What the hell are you talking about? About the same Karen you've been married to for 9 years? About the same Karen who is the mother of your 2 children? The same Karen? I nodded my head, swallowing a mouthful of pie. Yes, that's her. Well, for heaven's sake, what's the problem? I took a sip of my coffee. Karen seems to be doing some kind of extracurricular activity. Well, I don't know. It's probably been a while. I spent the next hour telling him everything I knew. I tried to find a way to salvage my dignity. It seemed to be beyond me now. Mark? I suppose you want to know a little about me and my problem. That's fair enough. I grew up in Albany, graduated from high school here, and received a scholarship to attend Columbia University in New York. I am a smart kid and have always done well in school. I think I am a good person. I always try to do the right thing. I have a strong work ethic, and I know the value of my family. I come from a good home. My parents taught me a lot about life and laid a strong foundation of values. They taught me to put my family first, and with my wife and 2 kids, I see that lesson every day. My problem is that my wife has different ideas about what is important to us as a family. Karen is dating another guy. I'm not sure I can live with that, but I don't know what to do about it. That's where Jordan came to the rescue. I needed his advice both legally and as a friend. So what do I do? Jesus, Mark, you're in a bind. Jordan sipped his coffee and looked down at the table. He exhaled heavily as he began to speak. Okay, there are 2 approaches you can take. The first I will outline to you as your attorney. The second is as your friend. I looked at him and nodded. The first, and this is what my lawyer says, you'll lose if you decide to divorce Karen. New York family law is mostly on the wife's side. Karen will in all likelihood get custody of the children, and with her, the house. Unless you can prove that she is a bad mother, the court will award her custody of the children. You can ask her for custody, and if she objects, the court will almost automatically give custody to her. Jordan took another big sip of coffee and signaled the waitress to pour another. I was about to speak when he held up his hand for me to wait. A fresh pot of coffee arrived. Along with the kids and the house, you're going to be paying for a bunch of stuff. A big chunk of the mortgage in proportion to your paychecks, child support until they turn 21 or graduate from high school, and probably an amount for Karen's maintenance. It used to be called alimony. Now it's called spousal support. Damn it, things were getting complicated. But the fun part was just beginning. Jordan told me a bunch more information I needed to know. A quick guide to divorce in New York. There are 7 grounds for divorce in the state. An irretrievable breakdown of the relationship for at least 6 months. This ground is commonly referred to as a no-fault divorce. To utilize this ground, the marriage must have been dissolved for at least 6 months and all economic issues, including debts, division of marital property, child custody, and alimony, must be resolved. Cruel and inhuman treatment. To use this ground, the judge will look for specific abuse that occurred within the last 5 years. It's not enough that you and your spouse fought or didn't get along. The abuse must get to the point where the plaintiff is in danger physically or mentally, and it becomes unsafe or impractical for him or her to continue living with the defendant. Abandonment. To use this ground, the spouse must have abandoned the plaintiff for at least a year or more. 2 examples of abandonment are a spouse physically leaving the home with no intention of returning, or a spouse refusing to enter into a relationship with the other spouse. This is called constructive abandonment. Imprisonment. To use this ground, the spouse must have been incarcerated for 3 or more consecutive years. The spouse must have been incarcerated after the marriage began. The petitioner can use this ground while the spouse is in prison, or within 5 years of the spouse's release from prison. Adultery. To use this ground, the plaintiff must prove that the spouse committed adultery during the marriage. This ground can be difficult to prove because evidence from outside of the plaintiff and spouse is needed. Divorce after a marital separation agreement has been entered into. To use this ground, the plaintiff and defendant sign and file a valid separation agreement and live apart for 1 year. In order for the separation agreement to be valid, certain requirements must be met. Divorce after a judgment of legal separation has been entered. This ground is not often used. To use this ground, the Supreme Court enters a judgment of legal separation, and the spouses live apart for 1 year. My eyes began to glaze over as Jordan continued his lecture and talked about divorce New York style. So, Mark, the most likely grounds for divorce, if you have chosen that route, are irretrievable breakup or adultery. To prove adultery, you will need actual evidence. Either Karen's admission that she is having an affair with another person, or for the person she is having an affair with to come forward and say so themselves, or other proof. I took a deep breath and looked at my friend. I knew the look on my face wasn't the best. Jordan continued, "Another point is the irretrievable destruction of your marriage. That's what most people cite as the main reason for divorce." He paused for empty effect. "You might want to think about that before you make a decision." I was confused. I had no idea what to say. Jordan took a deep breath and continued. Okay, I've told you what I should have told you as your attorney. Now I want to talk to you as your friend. I looked up from the hellish depths I had plunged into. I was hoping for a lifeline. I needed something to tell me that my life wasn't over, that the comfortable life I was enjoying with my family would continue. I needed to tell him, God, Jordan, I really hope you have something better in your arsenal than the misery you just described. Dude, you need to figure out what you want. What do you mean? I want my family. I want my wife and my kids. I want my life to go on with them like before. That's what I understood. So what I'm going to tell you, you have to listen and think about it. You have to realize what's most important to you. Your family, or a little bit of your dignity and ego? Oh, what do you mean? Look, I see people who go out of their way to do as much damage as possible. The whole scorched earth thing. They sacrifice everything just to make the other person miserable, and they only end up making themselves miserable. Jordan paused to let that sink in. Another big loser in divorce is the children. You have to realize how much you want them to suffer. I lifted my head and looked my friend straight in the eye. What? Yes, the children. Your children, they will lose the most. He paused again. They're going to have to get used to only seeing you a few days a month and every vacation. You'll have to get used to being a part-time father. Karen will get custody, and you'll have plenty of time without them. You can count on that. Damn it! What am I supposed to do? Jordan, what am I going to do? I couldn't believe what he just said. You hear stories about fathers who barely see their kids, about fathers whose divorce basically ruined their lives. I didn't want to be one of those victims. No. Jordan looked at me with a mixture of sadness and amazement. He was a good friend, but he was also a realist and saw the effects of divorce every day. Mark, can I make a suggestion? Of course you can. What kind? It may sound a little different, but I've seen it work. What? The decision is yours and yours alone, but if I were you, I'd seriously consider it. Please tell me. Don't do anything. What? Don't do anything. Don't do anything. Go home and pretend you don't know anything. Go home and go on with your life as you've been living it. Go home and enjoy your family. Go home and do all the things you normally do. Go home and play with your children. Go home and make love to your wife. Go home. Are you serious? Like a damn heart attack. You told me you almost never caught Karen having extramarital affairs. You told me you never noticed anything different. You told me she's always been a wonderful wife and a great mother to her children. You told me that she cares about her family and always puts you first. You told me she's a good wife. But nothing. I told you that you have to make your own decisions about what you want to do, and that's very true. But you have to decide for yourself if you want to ignore what you've learned for the sake of preserving married life. Think about this. How badly do you want your family? Enough to sacrifice the knowledge that Karen isn't being very honest with you? Enough to push aside the knowledge of her cheating? Enough to pretend that everything was unchanged? We were both finishing our already cooled coffees. The waitress threw slanted glances at us, signaling that it was time to order something to eat or pay and move on to take seats for paying customers. Oh my God, shit! I exhaled like I'd been holding my breath for hours. I need to think about this. Jordan stood up and I followed suit. We both threw a $20 bill on the table and headed for the door. Once we were outside, Jordan turned to me and said, I need to get back to the office. Call me anytime you want to talk. Let's meet for a beer Friday afternoon and you can tell me what's going on in your head. Until then, promise me you won't do anything, okay? Okay, I promise. Look, thanks for listening to me. And thanks for the advice, I guess. I've got a million things going through my head, and I need to think it over really hard. We went our separate ways. I walked back to my office, trying not to cross the road. Coming home, I followed Jordan's advice. Coming home from work, I was no different than anyone else. I kissed my wife and talked to the kids as usual. Karen was on her usual behavior. We had dinner. I helped the kids with what is considered homework these days. And then we played in the driveway, throwing balls into the basketball net I had set up. All very normal. After the kids got ready for bed and went to their rooms to read, no screens, just paper books, I decided to just watch Karen. I tried to memorize everything that attracted me to her. Her smile, her figure, her eyes, the curve of her hips, the way she moved. I fell in love with her at first sight. I knew she was the woman I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. She was the woman I wanted to have children with. So what the hell happened? Where did we get lost? Looking at us as a family, no one would have thought we had any problems. We looked and acted like a normal family that loves each other. We held hands in public. We kissed. The kids ran to us if they had a problem, if they needed to blow their nose or tickle their nose. We had fun. We were a team of 4. I would walk around the house and list all the many projects Karen did. She decorated the house beautifully and even did some remodeling. This woman was tireless. She went through almost every room of our house and made many changes from simple painting to trim, cabinet making, doors, and even bathroom renovations. I was the primary laborer on many of these jobs, but she was the brains behind the design. Where did she find the time to have fun with other men? Hell, sometimes I barely had time to go to the bathroom. My wife was a master of deception. But you want to know how I knew she was getting it from someone else? Fair question. At my job, I often meet with clients to discuss their needs for a project our company is building for them. Usually, the meetings are held at our offices, client offices, or construction sites. Sometimes we hold meetings at other locations. That day, we held the meeting in a small conference room at the Hilton Hotel. The clients were not from Albany, had only traveled there for a meeting, and were staying at the hotel. They organized the conference room. They even organized a lunch for us. During lunch, I decided to go outside for a few minutes and get some fresh air. I was going to walk around the neighborhood to stretch my legs and think about a problem we had with the design of the building we were going to build. As I was walking back to the hotel, a cab stopped in front of the entrance and a tall man about 35, 40 years old in a very expensive suit, got out of the back seat. A woman got out behind him. She looked remarkably like my wife. I walked up to the same entrance they were entering, just 100 feet behind them. He took her hand and they hurried into the hotel. I moved at a good speed and almost caught up with them as they entered the elevator. As they entered the elevator, they were the only ones in it. They turned around. He had his arm around her waist and I could clearly see it was Karen. She said something to him as the door was about to close, and he leaned over and kissed her on the lips. My world stopped. I stood in the same spot for almost 10 minutes, trying to realize what I had just seen. I shook my head. I needed to remember how to breathe. My chest tensed up. I thought I was having a heart attack. My legs gave out and I walked over to a chair and sat down. I sat like that until one of the meeting attendees walked by and asked if I was going back to the meeting. I went back, but didn't hear anything that was said. Good thing there were minutes kept at the meeting, so I didn't mess up the contract. I went home right after the meeting ended, expecting Karen to be packing to leave me. She was there, tending to the kids and making dinner. She greeted me the same way she did every night. That was a few weeks ago. Since then, I've been tormented all the time. Karen, our marriage, the kids, my life in general, how stupid I was. All of it. I was in deep shit. And that's when I decided to start making a plan. But I needed help, so I went to talk to my buddy Jordan. Jordan, I can't believe the shit Karen's been up to. After Mark came to me, I knew there was going to be a change in his life. I knew he had to do something. Although I warned him that the divorce would be very hard on the kids and himself, I know that a man can only take as much as he can handle. But the thing is, you have to realize what is most important to you and take care of that first. Everything else comes second. In Mark's case, he decided that the kids were the most important thing, and his interest came second, so he put up with Karen and her other life. I hired my regular investigator to make some inquiries about Karen. I wanted to get a much better idea of what she was up to before I told Mark. If he got the whole story, it could kill him. Mark? Time heals all wounds and wounds heal everyone. I heard that somewhere. I'm not sure it's true. All I know is that I managed to swallow my pride and pretend I didn't know anything. And here's the weird thing. If I hadn't seen Karen go into the elevator, I might never have known anything. Karen is still the same person she's always been. She is a wonderful mother and fiercely protective of our children. She is organized and hardworking. To me, she is the same woman I met and married 10 years ago, but now she isn't. I still don't know what to do. Do I go against her and kick her out on the street? Do I try to talk to her and try to work things out with the help of a marriage counselor? What if she's the one who wants to get rid of me? What? 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 What will happen to the kids? If Karen is in love with this guy and wants to leave us for him, I don't know what to do. That's where Jordan comes in. He's my bargaining chip. He's my man to help me figure out the intricacies of this crap show. Jordan. So, I've asked my investigator to do some work. Wolfie's a very good investigator. Her real name is Hannah Wolfenstein, but her friends and family call her Wolfie. She is a former police detective from New York City who was shot in the knee and fired for health reasons. She is only in her early 30s, divorced, tall, blonde, slender, and very pretty. She fits in well in many places and is therefore an excellent people watcher. She has a wide range of technical tools at her disposal. She is my go-to wand for information. She rarely disappoints. She's also not cheap. But in this world, you get what you pay for. I called Wolfie and asked her to come by my office. When she showed up, I immediately got a hard-on at the mere sight of her. She has that effect on men, all men. Her knee is almost back to normal by now, so you hardly notice any problems when she walks. She walked in, and after I brought her a cup of coffee, we started, "Jordo, what can I do for you?" She calls me Jordo. I have another wife who is leaving her husband. This one is the wife of one of my best friends. I handed her the file folder we'd compiled on Karen. It contained her places of employment, addresses, phone numbers, a picture of Karen, her car and license number, and a brief bio including height, weight, and anything else I thought might be useful. I could have done anything, but Wolfie handled the part that was more intrusive. She had the resources to dig deep into people's lives, including their financial affairs. I sipped my coffee and continued. Her husband spotted her at the Hilton Hotel downtown with a man who was much friendlier than a friend should be. Most likely this guy is a friend with benefits. I want to know what and with whom she is doing and for how long. Anything you can get will help her husband decide on a possible divorce and what we will use as grounds. Bottom line, I need leverage to make sure he gets custody of his children if it comes to that. Wolfie nodded and took new notes as I spoke. She had done this before, and I was sure that whatever Karen was up to, Wolfie would figure it out. She looked at me. "You know I don't work for free. I need a steady fee and a regular hourly rate." She wrinkled her nose. "It will take me at least 3 hours to develop a plan and conduct an electronic search. I will contact you in 2 days with a more accurate estimate. Is that satisfactory to you and your client?" "Great. He's a very patient man, but he needs information before he does anything. We'll talk in 2 days. Wolfie gathered up the folder, put it in her large bag, and stood up. As she reached the door, she stopped and turned around slightly. "You remember you still owe me that dinner, don't you?" "How could I forget?" "Hannah. Damn, I hate stupid women who think they can do whatever they want to their unsuspecting husbands and get away with it. I've seen too many of these smug bitches who have fun with the men they rely on to support them and pay for the life they want. My client is a hard-working and devoted family man who was scandalized by his wife when he happened to see her walking, holding hands, with another man and making out with him in the elevator of a top downtown hotel. According to Jordo, he doesn't want to throw her out on the street, but wants to know what's really going on and wants to know what his options are. I've dealt with this kind of thing before. From what Jordo said, the client wants to keep the family together if possible. But I know there's only so much you can do that you'll want to, explode. There are limits. I've seen rational, logical, and in control of their lives men go crazy and do things they later regret. Now I need to find out what Karen Francis is. I suspect that Mrs. Francis has done this sort of thing before. Either she is very comfortable in her actions and was a little lazy in hiding her infidelity, or this was her first time. I'm not sure, but I'm going to find out, and I'm going to email Jordo my estimate, and when he gives his approval, I'll get to work. Mark, 3 weeks later. I got a call from Jordan. His investigator is working tirelessly and is supposed to give me a report. I sure as hell hope that what I saw was just something that has an explanation. However, if it's more than that, I don't know what to do. When I got to Jordan's office, he led me into a small conference room, and I could tell by the look on his face that what I was about to learn was not what I had hoped to hear. Introductions were made. Jordan began. "Mark, Wolfie managed to get a lot of information. She's going to go over it, and then I think we should discuss it. In short, you are correct in your suspicions that Karen is involved with another man. Let Wolfie tell the rest. I turned to look at the investigator. Mr. Francis, I started looking into your wife right after Jordan told me what you wanted to know. I was able to learn a great deal about Mrs. Francis, and I regret to inform you that your wife has been involved with another man for an extended period of time. I grabbed my water bottle, drank it down, and ran to the bathroom. The water, along with everything else I had eaten in the last 12 hours, went into the toilet bowl. Everything in the toilet bowl swirled, and I think I blacked out for a few seconds. The next thing I knew, Jordan and Hannah were holding my head. He put a towel under my chin, and she was rubbing my face with a wet washcloth. It took a few minutes, but I was able to get back into the conference room. When the world stopped spinning, Jordan asked if I wanted to continue or stop and do it another time. I had to take a few deep breaths, but I replied that I wanted to continue. Better to get it over with now than stall for time. Hannah started again. Mr. Francis, we've done a detailed electronic search of your wife. I have to say that there is very little information on the internet about your wife. I know she works as a web developer, so she has the tools and ability to manage what is known about her. She has a Facebook page, and that's it. She doesn't use any other social media. Everything she posts on Facebook is family-oriented. It's the most basic, mundane information. There are a few pictures of you, her, and the kids, all very innocuous and show you doing something family-oriented. I went through her Facebook friends and studied them to see if there are any disguised ones among them. I looked at her with a questioning expression on my face. Are there any of her Facebook friends who aren't who they're trying to say they are? That would give them the ability to write direct messages to each other and then delete them without you or anyone else seeing them. We haven't found anyone who isn't a real person. But that doesn't mean your wife hasn't created a fake account under a different name, an alias. That's pretty common, and it's hard to detect if she's logging into that account from a device you may not know about. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Hannah looked at me and continued. So we had to resort to good old-fashioned methods. We attached a tracking device to your wife's car and followed her movements. For the first week, we simply tracked the various places she visited and weeded out the most obvious ones. Work, home, your children's school, the supermarket where you usually shop, and places like that. We then decided when and where we would follow Mrs. Francis and observe who she met and what she did. Only after that were we able to get down to business. Oh my. The second week, we installed a listening device in Mrs. Francis's car. It recorded everything that was said in the car. The recorder is voice-activated and is designed to filter out the normal noises of the car and the sounds of the road. It can also be accessed remotely to monitor the conversations that take place in the car. It was through it that we were able to learn that Mrs. Francis was planning to meet a certain Mr. Thomas Murray. Do you know him? I shook my head. No. She took a sip of water and continued her infernal litany. We made inquiries about Mr. Murray and found out that he is a corporate attorney currently working for the state of New York in the state comptroller's office. He is assigned a procurement and contracting project. It appears the state has decided to outsource that project. The rest is irrelevant. We did a detailed search on Mr. Murray and found that he is married to Brittany Murray, and they live here in Albany with their daughter Allison. Hannah handed me pictures of Thomas Murray, Brittany Murray, their daughter, and the house they live in. She asked, "Does it look familiar or does the house look familiar?" I shook my head. Not really. He could be the man Karen was with. To be honest, I wasn't following him at that moment. I was following her. We learned from the tape recorder in Mrs. Francis's car that she had planned to meet Mr. Murray at a hotel on the east side on Wednesday of last week. We were there and watched them go into the hotel and got these pictures. She handed me some pictures of Karen with him. They were holding hands. It seemed like they could have done it right there in the hotel lobby. She was holding his hand, and Hannah waited for me to take it all in before continuing. Once we found out who Mrs. Francis was dating, we were able to do a detailed background check on Mr. Murray. We believe that he and Mrs. Francis were a couple at the university before you met her. The room spun again. Jordan handed me a paper bag and told me to breathe into it. It helped a little. Hannah looked at Jordan, trying to figure out whether to continue. I looked at her. Keep going. I took a sip of water. We checked university records and found out that Mr. Murray was a third-year student when Mrs. Francis was a freshman. They dated for 2 years, at one point living together for a year. At that point, they broke up and Mrs. Francis moved into the dorms. I believe you met her shortly after that. Were you able to discover the cause of their separation? Yes. Mr. Murray went to law school in North Carolina. There, he met his wife and they were married as soon as he graduated. Their child was born about 6 months after the wedding. She got pregnant by him. Yes. When did Karen start seeing him again? We don't know exactly, but when we searched his financial records, we found that he has a separate bank account not linked to any of his other accounts. I believe he keeps it a secret from his wife. It is from that account that he pays for his hotel room almost every week. Does Karen have a secret bank account that she's hiding from me? Hannah hesitated for a moment before answering. I knew immediately what the answer would be. Yes, there is. It's opened at a credit union near her office. We found out she has about $40,000 in that account. I looked at Jordan and Hannah. Where the hell did she get that kind of money? I do the taxes and it's pretty simple. We save every month, but not here. We believe she was siphoning off money by taking 2 paychecks. One, about 75% of her paycheck goes into your joint account and the other 25% goes into her own. She also has a separate credit card at this credit union. She also has a phone that she uses to call Mr. Murray. My goodness, my wife is leading a double life. What the hell? Hannah turned to look at Jordan and he looked back and nodded. Then he spoke. Mark, we have some more information you need to know, and that's the hard part. How the hell could it be more complicated than that? Jesus, Jordan, how much worse can it get? Well, it's not what I was hoping for, but I think you need to know it. You have a right to know it. Now I was really puzzled. Okay, tell me what it is. Jordan, with the most depressed expression I had ever seen on his face, said, Go ahead, Wolfie, tell him. Mr. Francis, when I find out there is a long history of infidelity in a case, I automatically expand the search parameters to include other family members. Last year, you made the school the kids go to take cheek swabs for DNA testing in case of kidnapping or some other disaster. So, we accessed your children's DNA and compared it to yours and Mrs. Francis's. The results on Mrs. Francis were as you'd expect. She's the children's mother. When we compared your DNA to the children's DNA, we determined that you are not their biological father. What? Sir, I'm very sorry, but I have to inform you that you are not Keith and Andrea's biological father. I couldn't believe my ears. That's impossible. You must be mistaken. Jordan spoke up. Mark, I know it's hard to believe. We used your DNA from the paper coffee cup last time you were here and double-checked it. But we are sure someone else is the father of your children. My planet stopped spinning again. I couldn't breathe and I was about to pass out. The room spun again and I had to lie on the floor. In the time it took Hannah to tell me about the DNA tests, my whole world just crumbled. I have a cheating wife and I have no children. As you can guess, it took me a while to digest what Jordan and Hannah told me. She had a very well-prepared written report and she even had it on a memory stick for me to use. Jordan had a complete copy for his personnel file. He figured he would need it later on for his divorce settlement. I had a question for Hannah. Have you been able to establish who is the father of my children, Karen's children? We haven't gotten that far, but if you'd like, we can do certain things to take DNA from another person and compare it to the children. I nodded at her. Please do that. I want to know who the man who is their father is. I'm assuming it's Thomas Murray. Hannah looked at Jordan, then at me. He's who we believe is the biological father of the children. Okay, do that. I want to know. I paused. I don't want to know how you do it, but please find out and tell me. We finished. Hannah gathered up all the things she had, put them in a folder and handed it to Jordan. She stood up and started to leave. Mr. Francis, aside from the short time you spent with Mr. Murray, I think Mrs. Francis is really quite fond of you. She has all the outward signs of a woman who loves her husband. I realize that doesn't mean much now, but think before you do anything. One last piece of advice, if I may. Please don't do anything stupid and go to jail. It won't do you any good. Hannah turned, looked at Jordan and gestured for him to follow her. They walked out into the hallway outside the conference room and talked quietly. I saw her nod her head in my direction a couple times before kissing Jordan on the cheek and walking away. I figured they were friends who sometimes get a kick out of it. Jordan came back. For a few minutes we sat in silence. Then he stood up. "Come on, you're coming with me." "Karen, I know what you're thinking. Is it normal to be married and have a lover?" "Yes, it's normal, at least to me. And as far as I know, relatively common. For married people to love someone other than their partners. It happens more often than you might think, but not all people who fall in love with other people end up getting married. I love Mark very much. And at the same time, I love Tommy. You think I'm crazy and a liar. You can think what you want, but this is my life. Mark doesn't know about Tommy. And Tommy's wife doesn't know about me. And we both want to keep it that way. We spend one day a week together. That's it. We've been doing that for years. I've loved Tommy since before Mark and Brittany and I were married. Before either of us had kids. Tommy met Brittany when he was in law school and she got pregnant. He did the right thing and married her. Our relationship ended, and that's when I met Mark. We dated and I fell in love with him. We got married, and shortly after that I met Tommy. We started dating again. We never stopped loving each other. But now, we both had other commitments and other lives. I know it's wrong, but I couldn't help but see Tommy. Mark was my husband, and I loved him dearly. But Tommy, it seemed to me, was my true love. The problem was that we both had spouses to whom we were committed, which meant our love for each other was secondary. We started seeing each other once a week. It became a regular thing. A few months later, my period disappeared and I found out I was pregnant. Mark was ecstatic at the news that he was going to be a father. I didn't know who was going to be the father, Mark or Tommy. It didn't matter at that point. After Keith was born, Tommy and I took a pause as we considered the demands of being new parents. Mark took to the role of father like a duck to water. He's a wonderful father. He's tireless. He would work all day and then come home and take over parenting to give me a chance to shower and rest. I got used to being a mom, and it didn't take long before I had my shit figured out and could walk and chew gum at the same time. When Keith was about a year old, I got pregnant with Andrea. Those 3 years were a challenge, but they were wonderful times. My husband is my hero. He makes my life with him and the kids a joy. Time spent with Tommy is the entertainment I need. He makes me feel good about myself. He does things for my psyche that Mark can't do. I don't mean to say that Mark is a less worthy husband, person, or man. No, not at all. They are different. I want them both. I want them both. I can only have so much Tommy. Brittany has him the most, and rightfully so. I have all of Mark. He shows me every day that he loves me and the kids. I know we are his world. Mark? I had to ask Jordan to drive me home in my car. He took a cab to his office, and I walked into the house and just walked around the house looking at things like I had never seen them before. I walked over to Keith and Andrea's bedrooms and looked at them. I remembered all the times I had read them bedtime stories, nursed them when they had colds, changed their diapers when they were babies, carried them in my arms around the house, walked them around the floors with them at night to get them to sleep. They were my children. They had my last name. My name was on their birth certificates. How could Karen lie to me for so long? Why would she do that? If she didn't want to have children with me, why didn't she tell me that? Why did we get married in the first place? Why? We repainted and decorated the kids' bedrooms several times. When they were newborns and then after they went to school, we redecorated, added desks, changed paint colors, and made the rooms our own. They helped pick out furniture. I walked into our family room. On the walls hung framed pictures of us as a family. Some were taken during vacations, and there were more formal family photos taken at Christmas. They captured the growing up of the kids and us as a family. Why did she have to go and ruin everything? Why did she have to turn our marriage into a lie? Why did she have to rob me of one of the most important things to me? Do I hate her now? I loved her, and now I hate her. Why was she so cruel? I don't know what to do. I have no idea what I can do. Jordan was right. Don't do anything yet. I don't want to hurt the kids. I have a lot of things to figure out and then make some kind of plan. Karen, I got home from my meeting with Tommy just before Mark came home. I can always find out where Mark is by using his phone. I use the Find My app. It works very well and he always carries his phone with him. I am anxious to see where he is, especially when he is out with the kids. I worry about them. Tommy and I are only interested in each other for fun. I love Mark and I know that deep down Tommy loves Brittany. Getting pregnant with her was not in Tommy's plans, but when it happened, he accepted it and did the right thing. She's a very sweet person and I know they are good together. Tommy and I have the same needs. Don't get me wrong, Mark is a wonderful lover. He knows how to give me pleasure. But our lives are defined in many ways by the difficulties of married life. If you want to know why, if my life with my husband is so good, I have Tommy as my lover. That's a good question. It's really quite simple because I want him to be my lover. I want the attention he gives me. Tommy and I were a couple before Mark and before Brittany. He was the man I thought I would marry. I was in love with him, still am. But life doesn't always work out the way you dream. The reality is that Tommy and I weren't going to be married to each other, so I chose the second option. I met Mark and married him. Mark is a wonderful man. He is sweet, loyal, considerate, hardworking, caring, a great father, and will work himself to exhaustion to do anything I ask him to do. So why, you ask, isn't Mark enough for me? Why do I need Tommy? Again, because that's what I want. When Tommy and I broke up, it wasn't because I didn't love him. It wasn't because I didn't want to be with him. It wasn't because I didn't want to have a family with him. It was because he got Brittany pregnant and he had to marry her. Mark and Tommy complement each other. They both fulfill my needs. They both make me a very happy woman. With Mark, I get love and respect. He is so good, so honest, and such a perfect husband that any woman would be lucky to have him. I am lucky to have him. He is caring and attentive, and the physical closeness I feel with him warms my whole body. He is the perfect husband, the perfect father, and we have a deep connection that makes him mine. But I also have a deep connection with Tommy. The way I feel when I am around him is something I don't want to be without. When he touches me, I go into a state that is unlike anything else I've ever felt. He can do whatever he wants to me, and that's fine with me. Sometimes he wants me hard and fast and sweaty, and I love those moments. And sometimes he wants slow and gentle, and I love that too. We don't talk about our families that often. We spend time together just for ourselves. Away from everything else, no worries about family or work or anything else. Just the feelings we get from each other during those few hours. When we are done, we shower, get dressed, and get back to the reality of our lives. I always check my phone before I leave Tommy's to see where Mark is. I don't need a chance encounter in a place that will be hard to explain. I return to my reality and Tommy returns to his. It's a routine that has worked well for years. I'm not going to change it anytime soon. Mark? And it's been almost 2 weeks since the day Jordan and Hannah gave me the details of what Karen has been doing our entire married life. I feel like such a fool. She used me. And all this time she told me she loved me. All this time we had a life together, a family, a home, and a future, or so it seemed to me. My hopes and dreams turned into a cloud of crap in an instant. My entire married life was a lie. Now the problem is that I don't know what to do. How do I deal with this? When I look at Karen, I see the woman I married. She is sweet, charming, beautiful, talented, hardworking, and a great mother to our children. Our kids, not really ours anymore, her children. Thomas Murray's children. I don't have children. I feel violated and I can't talk to anyone about this. Jordan and I had a drink together 3 days ago, and he advised me to see a counselor. He gave me the name of one and made me an appointment. We'll see if that helps. Karen, I have noticed in the last couple weeks that Mark is very distracted. I have to speak several times for him to hear and understand me. He barely pays attention to the kids. Andrea has to tug on his arm to get him to pay attention to her. He apologizes for not listening, but after a few minutes, he seems to drift off into another world. He spends a lot of time at work and missed the school assembly we had planned to go to. I went by myself. He gets up very early in the morning and goes for a run. He usually runs for about 45 minutes and then comes home and takes a shower. Lately, he has been running for an hour and a half before coming home. He barely touches his food during meals and doesn't interact with me or the kids except for little things. Mark. I have been seeing a psychologist. Dr. Marilyn Snow. She is a very pleasant woman, in her 60s, and has a very calm approach. I explained to her the situation I was in and then told her how it made me feel. She asked if I was making any plans for the future. What am I going to do? Was I planning to have a confrontation with Karen? Was I planning on getting a divorce? Was I thinking about forgiveness? I replied that I was all in my thoughts, trying to make a plan. I told her that my friend and attorney Jordan had advised me not to do anything until I was sure of what I wanted to do. Dr. Snow agreed that was a good plan for the short term. But what about the long term? I still didn't have an answer. I knew that if the affair had been short, I probably would have forgiven her. But finding out that she'd never stopped seeing her real lover and that he was the father of her children was a punch to the gut that was hard to recover from. Even if I stayed with Karen, how could I ever trust her again? If I made peace with the way things were, I would be content knowing that I had become her second choice in life, that I was raising another man's children, that she cheated on me throughout our marriage. If Murray and his wife had separated or divorced, would Karen have come running to him? That was my question. How can I be happy now knowing what I know? Jordan. It's been over a month since I last saw Mark and he wants to meet me at the office today. He said he wanted to discuss a plan of action regarding Karen. I met him at the door and we went straight into the conference room. Mark took off his suit and I handed him a bottle of water. He uncorked it and took a sip. So what do you want to talk about today? Jordan, I've been agonizing over this ever since Hannah told me about what Karen is really doing. I went to that counselor you recommended. She helped me see things from a different perspective. I tried to be honest with myself. I've been thinking about this whole shit show for a long time, and I think I've made some decisions. Good. What can I do to help? So here's my plan of action. Mark detailed what he wanted to do. His plan was simple and straightforward, but at the same time he had a few specific issues that needed attention. My job was to start the paperwork and be ready to file court requests. Mark had already been to his banker and had had a long conversation with his employer. Now it was a matter of details and deadlines. I needed Wolfie's help in the implementation phase of the plan. 2 weeks later. Mark? Jesus, it's hot. Turn on the air conditioner. So, 2 days ago, I took the train from Albany to New York City, and then the subway to JFK Airport. My Air France flight took almost 18 hours to get to my destination. I had to change planes and stayed in Paris for about 4 hours. Welcome to the United Arab Emirates, more specifically, to the city of Dubai. My new, for now, home. I have a new job with an engineering company that is handling a major project in the UAE. So you're wondering how this came about? Well, in my business, we are constantly being asked to do engineering projects in many parts of the world. My boss was constantly fending off people trying to poach his engineers, but there are times when it is advantageous for an engineer to move to another company to do a particular project. This is usually to gain experience in some aspect of the job and then bring it back to the company. This is just such a case. So I took a job with a UK company that was doing a major construction project in Dubai. The work was stressful, but the rewards were great too. The money and benefits were insanely good. My base salary was AED 100,000 a month. That's about $25,000 US dollars. On top of that, there were benefits as well. The real perk was that there is no income tax in the UAE. Yes, you read that right? No taxes. I don't plan on staying here for more than 2 years. Culturally, it's not a place where I will feel comfortable for an extended period of time, but who knows, things can change. I don't have a hard and fast schedule other than to work and make as much money as possible. The climate here is very different from central New York. It will take some time to acclimatize. The job comes with an apartment and a car. The apartment is ultra-modern, in a high-rise building with underground parking and all the amenities. The car is a Mercedes E450. Of course, it's black and very fast. Not at all like my old Subaru Outback that I had in Albany. The company provided me with an assistant, British. Her name is Amanda. She's about 28, 30 years old, tall, slender, with long dark brown hair, wearing black glasses and a muted British appearance. Her accent suggests that she comes from a privileged background and is very well educated. She has a bachelor's degree in political science and a master's degree in international relations. She also speaks the local language. This will be invaluable. She picked me up from the airport and drove me to my apartment. I didn't bring much stuff with me. My old leather briefcase and one suitcase. I figured if I needed anything else, I'd just buy it. On the way to the apartment, she talked almost nonstop about the UAE, the city, and the people. She criticized and praised the UAE at the same time. I realized that the new job was going to be both challenging and possibly fun at the same time. When I left Albany, I knew all hell was going to break loose there. But that was no longer my problem. Karen and her boyfriend had created the problem themselves. Let them deal with it. Most of all, I felt sorry for the kids. I would have taken them with me, but I knew no judge would agree with that idea of separating them from their mother. But you want to know how it all ended in Albany. Jordan. My meeting with Mark took a couple hours. He brought some notes and a folder of material to talk about. At the same time, he wanted me to coordinate a few questions for him. So this is the finale for Karen Francis and Thomas Murray. Hannah found out where and when Karen and Murray usually met each week. Sometimes it was a hotel on the edge of town, next to a FedEx warehouse. Not one of the bigger or better-known ones. They could afford it. Who said business was cheap? The magic of the place was that it was close to the highway and they could get there easily. Murray had a buddy who would sometimes lend him a spare bedroom in his apartment to cut costs. They liked it a lot, but he didn't provide towels. Mark said he would pack his things in the morning and head to the train station. He was leaving the country. He didn't tell me where he was going, but I didn't need to know as long as I had his email address. He'd drop the kids off at school, and after Karen left for work, he'd come home, grab his bag, and catch a cab to the train. That's where Wolfie came into the plan. She was to prepare a packet of documents and other information for Karen and be ready to hand them over. Mark wanted us to wait until they were in the hotel room, and Murray was likely to approach Karen. The plan was to knock on the hotel room door, tell them it was the police, and open the door. When they opened the door, Wolfie would ask Karen for identification and, after taking a picture of it, hand Karen a packet with the usual statement, "You have been served." Wolfie was very good at this and managed to get a picture of both of them before she got out of there. In the envelope for Karen were the usual divorce papers, as well as copies of the DNA tests that showed that Mark was not the father of the children and that Murray was the father. There were also transcripts of phone conversations between Karen and Murray, in which they arranged their affairs, and a couple of photos that proved they were caught. I was going to wait for Wolfie to call me and let me know she had handed over the documents, and then my next task would be to call Brittany Murray and let her know everything that was going on. I invited her to come to my office and would be happy to tell her everything we had learned. Mark wanted to sue Murray to recover some of the money he had spent over the past 8 years raising Keith and Andrea, but he realized that was unlikely. We discussed the pros and cons, and Mark didn't want Brittany and her daughter to suffer because her husband was an asshole. D-Day. Yesterday, Mark called me and told me that today was supposed to be D-Day. Mark called it that because that's the day he's leaving. He's leaving for a new life. I immediately called Wolfie and she came to my office first thing today to pick up the packets of paperwork and finalize her plan. Wolfie was very excited when she walked into my office. I smiled at her and asked her, "What got you so excited?" The bitch was about to find out what the consequences of having fun with a man who had dedicated his life to her and, he thought, his children. She deserves every bit of what she's about to get. We sat at the conference table while I spread everything out into large envelopes and marked names on them. Wolfie and I chatted for a while, had coffee, and then she left to look after the building where Karen worked. A little after noon, she called to let me know that Karen was on her way. All I had to do was wait and be ready for Brittany Murray to call. Karen. I pulled into the hotel parking lot and saw that Tommy was already there. His SUV was parked at the edge of the parking lot. I parked and got out of the car. He got out and we met at the side door of the hotel. He already had his room key. I kissed him on the lips and, holding hands, we walked inside and took the elevator. Once in the room, we laid down on the bed. At that moment, there was a loud knock on the door. I heard a very loud voice say, "Mrs. Karen Francis, I know you're in there. Please open the door." We both stopped and looked at each other, and then at the door. What the hell? "Mrs. Karen Francis, open the door or the hotel security staff will open the door." Oh shit. Tommy fidgeted, trying to find his pants and shirt. I grabbed what I could find and started getting dressed. The knocking continued. Mrs. Francis were about to open the door. Wait, I'll get it. Tommy opened the door, but kept a chain on it so it couldn't open more than a few inches. When he did, we heard, Mr. Murray, open the door please, or we will open it for you. Tommy looked back at me, and seeing that I was only wearing a skirt and blouse, he closed the door, removed the chain, and opened it a little more. What are there? The woman who had been banging on the door and yelling at us stepped inside and looked at me. Are you Mrs. Karen Francis? There was some kind of badge attached to the waistband of her pants. I nodded my head. I need you to tell me yes or no, please. Ah, yes. She stepped forward. I need to see a photo ID, please. I looked around, found my purse, and pulled out my driver's license. She took a picture of it on her cell phone. Then she handed me a large envelope. You have been served? She turned to Tommy, handed him the envelope, and said, Mr. Thomas Murray, you have been served. Nay. She stepped back and took a quick picture of the two of us, then turned and walked away. What the hell was that? I looked at the envelope and realized my world had just crumbled. I knew Mark had found out about Tommy. His silence for the past few weeks now made sense. Suddenly, the room began to spin, and I seemed to pass out. The next moment, I came to my senses, lying on the bed. Tommy was sitting in a chair looking at his cell phone. I got up and rushed into the bathroom and threw up, barely making it to the toilet, and I waited there until I couldn't get up and then went back to my room and gathered my things. I should go home. Said I walked out of the room without even looking at Tommy. Karen. I somehow made it home without getting into an accident and walked into the house. Mark, where are you, honey? I went around every room in the house looking for him. I even looked in the children's rooms. He wasn't there. I went back to the kitchen and then I saw a white envelope with my name on the island. I opened it, and in it was a single piece of paper and Mark's wedding ring. Shit. I sat down and unfolded it. Karen, by now you should realize that I know all about your years-long affair with Thomas Murray. I know that you and he were together before we were even married. If you have not yet read the documents that have been handed to you, do so soon. There you will see that I know I am not Keith and Andrea's father. You gave that honor to Thomas Murray. That's what hurts the most. Not being the father of the children I tried to love and raise. Your deception ruined everything. For that, I can never forgive you. So where does that leave you and me? Well, I left. I didn't bring much stuff with me, so the house and everything else is all yours. Jordan has some papers for you for later, but I signed away my rights to the house and the rest of our property. Considering how long you've been lying to me, I suppose you want to know how I found out about you and Thomas Murray. It was completely by accident. I was in a meeting at the same hotel where you and he were meeting. For fun. During one of the breaks, I was walking around and saw you and him getting into the elevator. You turned around to kiss him. You had the same look on your face that I had when I thought you loved me. How stupid I was. I won't mess with you anymore, so you can get on with your life and I can get on with mine. I'm sorry that Keith and Andrea will suffer the most from all of this. Your secret life will have an impact on them. Maybe they can get to know their real father and he will be a good father to them. I'll miss them very much. Goodbye. Mark. Tossing the letter on the counter, I walked over to the couch in the family room and sat down. I pulled out my cell phone and called Mark. The number you have dialed is not in service. Please check the number and dial it again. Shit. I called his office. The girl who answered the phone told me that Mark had left the company. She didn't know where he'd gone or what he was doing. Shit. I called his mother. She had no idea what I was talking about. I thanked her and hung up. Shit. Finally, I opened the envelope of papers and started going through them. Everything was in there. All of my stupidity over the last 10+ years, laid out in black and white, as well as a couple of full-color photos. The DNA test results were there too. I'd never tested the kids' DNA, but I knew they were Tommy's when they started growing up and their facial features had changed from infancy. What did I do? Mark? Jordan wrote me a letter and told me how things were going with the exposure of Karen's affair. It was a difficult time, but I knew our life with her had come to an end. I could no longer look at her and believe that she really loved me. I was her second choice. When I found out Murray was the children's father, it was over. I had to leave and never look back. I had already been in the UAE for a month and was almost fully acclimatized. I called my mom and dad and told them what had happened, and while they were saddened by it all, they understood that I couldn't take the humiliation from Karen. I'm still young. I will find a new woman to share my life with. Jordan revealed that his relationship with Thomas Murray and his wife Brittany was strained. She called Jordan and then visited his office, and Jordan told her everything she had learned about her husband's longtime affair with Karen. She had not yet made the decision that he knew of to send him away. Karen approached Jordan and demanded to know where I was. He didn't know himself, of course, so he wouldn't have to lie to her. Jordan made her sign papers to file with the court, divorce papers, and one special request that I wanted the court to approve. I wanted the court to order that my name be removed from Keith and Andrea's birth certificates. I wanted Thomas Murray's name on them. After much bickering with the judge and DNA records, the court granted my request. This meant that there would never be any legal questions about who was responsible for them. So far, life in the UAE is very good, Karen. Being a single parent isn't everything. I have to do so much more to take care of the kids in the house. Without Mark, I have no one to share the work with. My dad started coming in and doing some of the small repairs that Mark had to do. Dad comes in, does what he came in to do, chats with the kids if they are there, and leaves. He hardly ever talks to me. My mother and father found out why Mark left. They knew that before Mark, I was in love with Tommy. But they thought it was over when Tommy married Brittany. They had no idea that I had been seeing Tommy the whole time. Tommy's on a short leash himself. I haven't been with him since that day at the hotel when everything went to hell. I don't know what to do with the kids when they recognize him. Is that even a good idea? The house and most of our savings are mine, but I still have to work and pay the bills. The court ruled that Mark is not financially responsible for the kids because they are not his, and I have kept that a secret from him. As for child support for me, the money in the bank is mine, and I can use it as I see fit. Plus, I still have my secret bank account. Well, it's not that secret. Mark knew about it. I guess I really screwed up. What am I supposed to do now? 6 months later. Mark, my life goes on. I miss Karen, and especially the kids. But when I think about her, I just get angry at her and at myself for the whole marriage we've been cheated out of. So I do my best to stay busy and not think about her. My social life is resuming slowly, but it is resuming nonetheless. I have gotten to know many of the people I work with and have discovered some very talented people who work here for various reasons. Many came here for the money, many to experience a different lifestyle and culture, and some to recover from bad experiences. I am here for all of these reasons. Last month, I took a trip across the desert to an oasis on a motorcycle I bought. I bought a used BMW F800 GS and outfitted it with some travel accessories. There is a motorcycle club here that organizes weekend trips, so I signed up and went for fun and to see more of the country, not just the overpriced city. Amanda told me she really wanted to do something like this, and I invited her along. She had never ridden a motorcycle before. And this was my first time taking a passenger. Oh, what fun. We had a great time. The organizer thought we were a couple, so when we got to our destination, there was only one room with one bed for us, and the hotel was full. We had to share. It was a little awkward at first, but we managed. I suggested we sleep on the floor, but she said that was ridiculous and we would get by just fine with one bed. In the morning, I woke up with my arm around her waist. I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did. Then she headed for the bathroom. I heard the water turn on and then, "Are you coming or not?" That's how it started. After that, things were different. 18 months later. Amanda. Mark and I went back to London to visit my parents. They met him last Christmas when we were visiting for the vacations. My father is a banker and my mother is a teacher. They are well off and approaching retirement. They were curious about the American I told them I had brought home to introduce them to. My father wanted to get to know Mark better, so they went to a local pub for a pint or two of beer and a chat. A couple hours later, they returned, and my dad was smiling and feeling more comfortable around Mark. My dad wanted to get to know him better and learn more about him. Well, he did. I'm sure he shared what he learned with my mom. Now it's summer, we're back, and we have big news for my parents. Mark and I are moving back to the UK. Well, it's not moving for Mark, as he's never lived here before. He has a new job with a company, a big construction project in the Cotswold area. The money is big, so we've decided to rent a house for now, and in a couple of years, depending on where we live, maybe buy a place. We need a house with at least 3 bedrooms, and I'd like a house with 2 bathrooms so we don't have to share them with guests. I'm selfish. The other big news is that I'm due to give birth in November, so we want to move in, get settled, sort out the medical issues, and get married. Oh yeah, that too. Karen, I have searched for Mark online almost every day since he left. I still have the letter he left me in the kitchen. The children were devastated that the father they knew left without a word to them. What could he say to them to explain, "I'm sorry, kids, but I'm not really your father and your mother is a lying, worthless whore and I'm leaving"? Yeah, that'd be nice. I know I made this mess on my own. I see a therapist once a week and probably will as long as my health insurance will cover it. She says I've been deluding myself that I can have both men at the same time with no consequences. She said that I set Mark up for failure as a husband and father, and that's why he was destined to leave. She advised me to apologize to Mark and the children. It would be nice if I could find him. I don't have the money to hire private investigators, so I ask his family from time to time if they can tell me how to contact him. Mark's father tells me to back off. His mother won't talk to me at all. No, we live in a smaller house now, it's cheaper to maintain. The kids hate it, but it's what we can afford. I drive Mark's old Subaru. It is still reliable and runs well. Mark. I tried very hard to forget that period of my life when I thought I was the luckiest guy on earth. Until I wasn't. If it hadn't been for my ex-wife's chance encounter with her lover that day at the hotel, I probably wouldn't have even known about it. But I did find out, and I had to do something about it. 10 years of deception is no small thing. How can you do such a thing? Look another person in the face day in and day out, tell them you love them, and yet betray them. Steal their love and give it to someone else. How can you lie to your own children? Like, I'm certainly not perfect, and many will criticize me for the way I dealt with Karen and her betrayal, but it was the only thing I could do and live with myself. My biggest regrets are for my children, Keith and Andrea. I hope they get to know their real father and he can love them as much as he loved me. Karen killed my love. She poisoned this well. I can't look at Keith and Andrea knowing they are only alive because of their mother's deception. They deserve better than that. I will do everything I can every day to be a good father to my child. Jordan. I realized the last words. Mark's act was drastic. I thought he would regret leaving his children even though they weren't his children. He was in the delivery room when they were born, and he raised them. He was the man they called Daddy. He changed dirty diapers, fed them, burped them, and was there for them when they said their first words and took their first steps. But I was watching a friend who was deeply, deeply, deeply hurt by the betrayal of a woman who had promised and professed her love to him. She betrayed him in the most fundamental way, lied to him every day of their married life, hid that both children were not his. I understand why Mark left. As his friend and lawyer, I supported him. I still get calls from Karen asking where he is and asking me to text him to call her or come home. I sent several such messages until Mark told me to stop sending them. So I did. Every 3 or 4 months, I get a short letter from Mark telling me where he is and what is going on in his life. I know he is leaving the UAE for the UK. I know there is a new woman in his life and her name is Amanda. I promised I wouldn't say anything to Karen. I'm happy for Mark. He set up an education account for Keith and Andrea to help pay for college or university when the time comes. I'm the trustee. I will make sure they get the money when the time comes. On a more personal note, I got married. Yes, you guessed it. To Wolfie. Well, my family and her family call her Hannah. She's pregnant, and we're having a baby in December. I'd better forget her nickname by the time our baby realizes what it means. I don't want to scare the baby. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.